Welcome back for Chapter 2 of my project where we're going to create an action RPG in GameMaker. As you can see from the image on the screen, we're going to add weapons today. So the goal of this video is to get a sword working. We're not going to worry about any UI or any actual hit detection yet, but we want to get the character swinging a sword and getting the animations to play correctly. The next video is going to take a look at adding a different weapon type, like a spear, so that we can have some variety in our attacks, so that we have, arcing weapons, stabbing weapons, projectile weapons. So we're going to need some attack animations. So I didn't prepare those ahead of time because I wanted to demonstrate another way that we could slice these out of the sprite sheet. So I'm going to take an existing set, and I'll just take these four, and I'm just going to copy them, or actually I'm going to duplicate them. And I'm going to start renaming these to player melee down. And I'm going to repeat that process for all of these. So player melee left, player melee right, and then player melee up. These will be my attacking animations once I load them. So let's start with down. So I'm going to double click that to make sure I'm looking at that. And then I'm going to do edit image, import strip image, and I'm going to head over to my player. So I want the 64 by 64. Now I did make an old version that had the sword, but in this version, the player actually doesn't have a weapon equipped. And that's because I'm going to actually kind of dynamically draw either like a sword or a spear onto the player when they're attacking. So I don't want these to have any actual sword in the animation. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. These are 64 by 64. Now I want the ones that are right after. I guess I can zoom in on this. It's not that bad. So the attack animations are right after this kneeling one. So the down ones are on this first row. So I have two animations that I want. So I want a vertical cell offset. If we can adjust this so we can see a little bit better. There we go. So I want a vertical cell offset of 5, which will take me to here. Oh, I cropped it wrong. It should have been 4, but there's this row of the thick line version of the player. That's not a big deal. A horizontal offset of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then those will be my downs frames. So I want to kind of repeat this process 7, and then it'll be 6, 7, 8 for the vertical offset. So I'm going to hit convert. And it's going to grab those two attacking frames. I'm going to go to left. And before I even adjust anything, I'm going to go and fix all of these. So I'm going to do the same, edit image from import strip image. And left would be, looks like down 2 more. So this would be 7. Right, melee right, edit image from strip image, import strip image. And I believe this is going to be 6 for the vertical offset. And then melee up, which you really can't tell, but we'll do it anyway. And that will be 8, I believe. All right. So now I want to arrange these to be kind of in a bit of a logical order. So this one's fine. My second frame has the player's right hand, because I'm assuming the player's right-handed, having their right hand extended. So I'm good with that. The right one looks fine. So we're kind of standing like this, and then the player's going to quickly bring their hand around there. Now, I found this is going to look best at a frame rate of like 14, somewhere in that ballpark, because that's going to be fast. 14 frames per second here. Now, left, I do want to change, so I'm going to just drag and drop it so I can reorder the frames. So the frame with the cape and the hand extended is the last frame. And this one's fine too. Okay, so we've got our frames. Now we've got to set up them in the player. So let's jump over to Object Player. And inside of the Create step, well, now we have attack animations. So we can take an entire set of these, copy, paste, and then just replace walk with melee. Because now we have animations for this. While we're here, I am going to set something up that's kind of important. Because this has to do with where the player's hand appears for purposes of making sure the sword doesn't just appear in a really silly location. And these are just going to, I'm going to do it like I did these arrays up here. I'm going to write down my initial, and this was just me experimenting to see what are the offsets. So this is relative to that bottom center value as to where the player's hand is in a given number of pixels. So we're going to have an array called animation hand x, and that's going to equal negative 14, 14, 14, negative 14. Animation hand y, negative 24, negative 24, negative 30, negative 18. These will come into play a little bit later, but I'm just throwing this in here now so I don't have to deal with it later. So I want to, before I worry about getting the sword to work, let's try to trigger these animations so we can actually see the player doing all of this. Now there's a few more instance variables I'm going to need. So I'm going to add one. And I'm going to call this anim locked. And this is going to be whether or not my animation is locked. Like if my state is allowed to change. And then a variable for attack enabled. And this is going to track whether or not I'm allowed to attack. So that's going to be true for now. So let's add an event for the mouse click. So we want the global left. Depends if we want to do it when it's pressed or released. I'm going to go with pressed. So the moment you click the mouse, not when you release it, but when you click it, the attack will start. So So we still need to make a weapon, but we still need to do some of the other stuff. First up is to calculate the mouse angle. And that's going to be point direction from my X and Y to the mouse X and Y. Now, I will say that's a little bit, we don't need to worry about exactness because this is coming from the feet rather than kind of the torso. It's fine. Then we want to play the attack animation. So we're running the animate command, and we're going to pass it essentially a componentized vector of the direction the mouse was looking. So this takes the mouse direction, turns it into a unit vector, and then it calculates the component X and the component Y so that the animate method can determine which direction to show the player attacking towards. So if you are looking right, but your mouse is to the left of the player and you attack, then you will be facing, you'll turn to the left for this. I don't want to say freeze the animation. I think lock the animation makes more sense. Nm locked equals true. Because what's going to happen is if I don't do some kind of locking of the animation, every frame when movement gets called, movement is going to override the animation. Did I spell animation wrong? I think I did. What did I call that? I think I spelled it wrong. Couldn't see it, but copy and paste fixed it. All right, so we need to then go to the animate script and add in the functionality for us to be able to animate. So jumping over to the animate script, first up, if we've locked the animation, don't change it. So if anim locked, return. So that'll end the method immediately without considering anything else. Then we need, so this old code was written with input in mind, where it kind of considered that the player would only be pressing 1 to -1. And so now we need to kind of, the mouse could be in a variety of different positions and at 360 degrees around the player, whereas this was only cardinal directions. So we need to upgrade this. So if the horizontal component, so if the absolute value of the horizontal is greater than or equal to the absolute value of the vertical, and horizontal is less than 0, then turn left. So this greater than or equal to is going to give preference to horizontal over vertical in cases where you are exactly pressing up and left at the same time. So same thing here. If the horizontal component is greater than or equal to the vertical component, and horizontal is greater than 0, then do right. Now for this, we're going to switch the sign to just being less than. If the horizontal is less than the vertical, so that's an important upgrade that will make the attack animation work correctly. And we just need to add attack onto this list here. So else if, copy and paste this for quickness, animation state attack. Then we want to pull Were these called attack or melee animations? They were called attack animations. So this is attack animation. And that's all the changes we need to do to here. So I added this to skip out if it's locked, upgraded how we detect which direction to go, and then we added attack onto my list of possible states that I could be in. So let's hit play and see if we can jump to the attack state. So you can see that the player, once I choose to attack, gets stuck in an infinite loop. Because of the animation lock, once I pick a direction, it's going to stay facing that direction forever. That one's interesting why it's flashing. We'll have to investigate that more. But I'm not going to worry about it till I fix and iron out all the bugs. Oh, we had an extra frame here. There we go. Weird. So until we unlock the animation, we're going to be stuck in this infinite attack loop, but at least it's smart enough to know that depending on the way that I'm facing when I click the mouse, it's going to attack in that direction. And that's what we wanted. So next up is to actually put the sword in, because the sword is going to be what unlocks my animation state and finishes my animation. Actually, let's fix this thing so I don't loop forever. So let's add an event. Animation end. So when the animation ends, if I am in the... So we'll just say, don't loop attack animation. So when the animation ends, if my anim state is equal to animation state dot attack, then we'll set the animation to the last frame only. So that's image index equals image number, which is the number of frames, minus 1 because it's 0 indexed. So this is the length of the images, so like 2 frames for each attack. Image index is 0 indexed, meaning the 2 frames are 0 and 1, so we just want to stay on frame 1, the final frame of the animation. And so that'll prevent us from scrolling forever. So we'll just kind of hold that pose while we're attacking. And that's kind of what I wanted. I don't want flickering fast. And now, weirdly enough, GameMaker doesn't have a way to tell animations not to loop. This is the only way you can like block an animation from looping. So you might end up finding that you'll use this in other cases if you want to play through an animation and hang on the final frame of that animation. Okay, so now it's weapon time. So in this part, we're going to add a weapon, a sword, for the player to swing. And much like a lot of top-down games, kind of Stardew Valley might be the most iconic here, we're just going to have the sprite swing. We're not going to have like the player go through a really cool like attacking animation. The sprite's just going to rotate on the screen. And that's fine. So we need weapons. So in the sprites folder, we can choose to place it inside the player if we want. So inside of player, I'm gonna create another group called weapons. And I'm going to right-click, create a new sprite. And this will be called SPR _ weapon sword. And then I'm going to go to import. And in the weapons folder, I'm going to grab this larger looking sword. The smaller one isn't going to rotate very prettily. So we're going to try to do the spear and potentially an axe and a bow. So we import the sword. And now I want to rotate this because GameMaker considers 0 degrees to the right. And so it would make a little bit easier math if I just can rotate this. So I'm going to edit the image and check under image to see if there is a rotation. And it says rotate all frames. This is a clockwise rotation. That's all I needed to do. So I'm going to position the spawn. This is the point of rotation. So I figure if I'm spawning it in the player's hands, the point of rotation makes sense for it to be right there. We can see if that looks good. If it doesn't look good, well, we can change it. Then the hitbox. So the hitbox of the sword is something that you can consider. I definitely don't want a rectangle, and I want to have manual control. So you could do, remember, rectangle with rotation if you want to keep it as a rectangle. Maybe an ellipse and shrinking it down so that kind of the hilt, well, not the hilt, but this right here constitutes the hitbox of the sword. It's okay if it's a little bit wider, because we're going to, only hit enemies 1 per swing. So it doesn't need to be so small that it will pass through the enemy immediately. However, that's completely up to you how you want to set up your hitbox. Let's pull back a few pixels. There we go. All right, so that's my hitbox. I can close this. Remember to have set your origin to probably the handle, not really the hilt. It'll look weird if we're rotating around the hilt. Now we need an object for this, so I'm going to do that under player. Well, I'll make it under objects. New group, weapons. First up is a parent, because we are going to have multiple weapons. So this will be obj melee parent. Then I'm going to create a new object called obj weapon sword. And I'm going to choose the sprite that I just made for it. And I'm going to parent it to the sword parent. Well, to the melee object parent. So the melee object parent, let me put in a few instance variables for it, and then we'll get to scripting. So first up is the melee arc. How much of an angle does this weapon swing in? Then I'm going to call this melee poke. We'll come back to that. That's going to be for the spears and lances type of weapons. Melee speed, and this is a frames description. So this is how fast the weapon swings in. I don't know, 10. Exist counter. And then we also need a starting angle. So those are the instance variables that I'm going to need to keep track of when I program this weapon. As far as the sword goes, since the sword now just inherited all of these, the only one that I want to change, I want to change the arc. I'll make the sword swing in an 80-degree arc, and it will swing in a span of 25 frames. So jumping over to the melee parent, we can start setting this up to do everything that we need it to do. A bit of bit heavy of number crunching that we're going to have to do. So this part is a little number crunchy. So I do kind of apologize a little bit. It's as compact as I can make that. All right, let's go start with the create. So in this create task, we're going to set the starting angle so that we know which way to rotate, basically. Spawn at the player. X equals global.manager.data_player.x. It's a convenient way to access the player. We'll do the same for Y. Then calculate the angle. So that is the angle underscore start, and that's just the point direction calculation to the mouse. Then we need to kind of take, so here's kind of the thought process, and this deserves an MS Paint diagram. So if we're standing here, and I click the mouse right here, what I don't want my sword to appear right here and then swing the 80 degrees this way. That's what I don't want. What I want instead is that when I click right here, my sword actually spawns a little bit up here and then swings through. So basically so we spawn 40 degrees to the left of that point, and then we go 40 degrees past that point. The other rule that I'm implementing with how I'm going to program this is I'm always swinging towards the bottom of the screen. So based on where I click, I want to swing down. So the swing is always heading towards the bottom of the screen. So if I click over here, and even if the sword starts like right here at the top of my head, because I'm like most of the swing is over here, I want to swing down this way. All right, so let's first calculate that. Let's kind of set the offset. Move the sword half the angle behind the target. Click. So this is the left side because it's easier to put this in an if statement. So if the angle is greater than or equal to 90, which is straight up, and the angle start is less than or equal to 240, which is straight down, we're going to move counterclockwise. So this takes a half of the arc that we're going to swing. So if this is going to be 80, we divide that by 2. Now we have 40 degrees. And so we're starting 40 degrees behind the target angle that we were trying to swing at. So this is left side. And all this is just a different plus sign here. So we could, well, I guess we don't spawn the sword yet, so we can't really see this. But we could jump over to the player, spawn the sword real quick. so that we can at least see this happening. So if I jump to the player, so this is it for the create step. This is all create's going to have. So if I jump to the player, on the global left click, we could spawn a weapon. So instance, if I can type, instance create layer, x comma y, comma layer, which is the current layer I'm on, object weapon sword. Now, this is going to probably get changed in a future video, so it's a more generic, like a variable, what weapon I currently have equipped, but we'll worry about that in a little while. So if we hit play, we should see this spawning behavior do its thing. So like if I click here, the weapon should spawn up here. Or it doesn't, because the specified layer does not exist. Interesting. Well, we'll just set it to instances. So you need to make sure you have an instances layer. So you can see that it spawned up here, because that's going to be 40 degrees to that mouse click. Also, you'll notice it's spawning at the player's feet. That's because we didn't set up the hand offset yet. So, we'll get to that. Weapon sword. So this, oh, no wait, weapon parent. There we go. So let's do the step task for the sword. I guess we'll do begin step so it happens before collisions start registering. First up, do the depth. So that would be depth equals -y. Everything that's kind of an actor in the world needs to have that. So move with the player. X equals global.manager.dataPlayer.x. Do the same for Y. Now remember, we're not using our offsets for the hands yet, so this is going to follow my feet. We'll add that in a second. Rotate. Rotor. Well, because combine rotate and towards. Rotate towards the bottom of the screen. So if angle starts is greater than or equal to 90, and angle starts is less than or equal to 270. So if we remember which side we started on, direction plus equals melee arc divided by melee speed frames. So basically, it takes the total distance we want to travel, and then divides that by the number of frames we're going to do it over, and adds it. Same thing for image angle. It'll be melee arc divided by melee speed frames. And then this version, we'll just do subtraction. All right, next up is increase the counter to destroy it. So exist counter plus equals 1. So we should probably put the code here to delete it. So if exist counter is greater than or equal to the melee, let's just do greater. Melee speed frames, so the number of frames this animation was going to take, we will do instance underscore destroy. But we haven't unlocked the player's animation yet, and we'll actually have the sword do this. So when we hit play, we should see a crash. Oops. Oh, melee. I didn't specify melee arc. Well, while we're here, we will also unlock our animation. So we'll say global.manager.dataPlayer.animLocked equals false. So right when we destroy the sword, we also unlock the player's animations. So that's a kind of slower sword, and that's because it's going at 25 frames. You could speed it up if you like. But notice that it's following my feet. That's what we didn't want to do. So we're going to have to fix that. It's not a very hard fix. You'll notice that the sword appears behind the tree. If we're in front of it, it appears in front. Also, we have no limit on how fast we can swing the sword. We should probably fix that. So to limit the attack speed so that we can only attack when the sword is done, jump over to the player, to global left pressed, and disable attack by saying attack underscore enabled equals false. And then we'll just enable that back inside the weapon. So we'll just copy this, and instead of anim locked, we will say attack enabled equals true. So the player will then be able to attack again. You can verify that works pretty quickly. We hit play. Oh, I need an if statement. See, that's why you always check your code. So I actually need to wrap all of this inside of an if statement. If attack enabled, then do all of this. Oops. Attacked. Misspelled that. There we go. So we've got to fix the issue of it following the feet. And that's really, I think, about it for this. So to fix the issue of the feet, it's actually not that bad. We just need to do a little bit of math onto this line of code. So instead of going to X, we want to go to global.manager.player, data player, .animation underscore hand X. And this is an array, so I want to index it with global.manager.dataPlayer. Now here's the beauty of why we were tracking this animation direction. We can just pull anim direction and know instantly where it needs to fit. We'll do the same for Y. Now copy these and go fix that line inside of the create step. So if you need that line, you can pause it real fast to grab this. And now, so if you feel it's a little too high, like if it's a little bit higher than you would expect, well, we can very easily tweak these values. So you could lower the Y values, make this less negative, and that will go more towards the feet. So play around with it until you get something that looks good. Like this, for instance, I think is in the wrong hand. Like it looks like the player's hand kind of, if it's the right hand, might be down kind of on this side. So, you know, maybe when I'm facing down, this might want to be positive 14. And maybe I'll even pull it in closer. So these offsets could take a while until you get something that you're happy with. And it's kind of hard to tell. It looks like it's behind the player. So, you know, you might have to kind of get fancy with this. And maybe adjust a few things so that it appears on top. Or we can just not worry about it for now. And so now we have a weapon. So in the next video, I'm going to take a look at doing a different type. I'm going to try to do like a lance or a spear. The video after that, I want to take a look at doing a ranged weapon. Then we will start tying all this together by putting together a user interface and some kind of way to swap these weapons. And maybe as a bonus, we can play around with some alternate like right-click special attacks. Maybe we can do some lunges so that if you right-click with the sword, you lunge forward. So, but that's what we're headed towards. We're going to add some new weapons. So I'll see you in the next video where we get our lance on.